Welcome to the Global WarWatch Network. Before we get started, please take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel so you can stay informed on these critical global conflicts. Today, we're tackling a really tough question about the war in Ukraine. Is a Korean-style armistice the right answer, or is it actually a trap?
Right. This isn't just about stopping the fighting, it's all about what comes next. See, an armistice without a real peace treaty could just open the door to rapid rearmament, force the construction of massive defensive lines, and create this incredibly high-stakes geopolitical buffer zone that's just waiting for a spark to set it all off.
So, to really get a handle on the risks for Ukraine, we have to look back at the most famous historical parallel there is, the Korean War. It gives us a pretty stark lesson about what a pause in fighting actually looks like in the long run. Okay, this is an absolutely critical distinction. An armistice is not a peace treaty, not even close. Take the Korean War. Technically, it never ended. That 1953 agreement just stopped the shooting. It basically put the conflict on ice without solving any of the reasons it started in the first place.
And this really puts the difficulty into perspective, doesn't it? The only reason they reached an agreement was that both sides finally had to accept that a military victory was just impossible without paying an unacceptable price. And those talks were brutal, stalling for months while the war just kept on raging. Now, what's really critical to see here are the differences in scale and security. In Korea, the U.S. has troops on the ground that act as a tripwire. An attack on South Korea is an attack on the U.S., period. But for Ukraine, any armistice would depend on these heavily debated, much less direct security guarantees, which could make a frozen frontline incredibly volatile. This highlights a huge point for today. An agreement could be pushed through even if one of the main countries fighting is against it. South Korea's president was vehemently opposed, but intense pressure from the U.S., a mix of threats and promises of aid, basically forced him to go along with it. That creates a really fragile foundation for peace. So, what would this kind of frozen front actually look like on the ground for Ukraine? Well, it means transforming the entire nation into a permanent, heavily armed fortress. And we're talking about an enormous line. The contact line that would have to be fortified is estimated to be around 2,000 kilometers long. That would create one of the most heavily defended borders in the entire world, far longer and more complex than the Korean DMZ. Just to defend a line that long, Ukraine would need a massive, sustained military force. We're talking a combined active and reserve force of nearly 600,000 people. That is a huge commitment for a nation that's also trying to rebuild itself. And the fortifications themselves would be immense. You'd need at least 1 million anti-tank and anti-personnel mines, all just to create these dense, layered kill zones designed to make any new ground assault impossibly costly for an attacker. This whole approach is often called the porcupine strategy. The goal is deterrence by denial, make yourself so prickly and dangerous that any new attack is just unthinkable. But this isn't something you can do overnight. It would probably take about 5 years to build and would require a multi-decade effort of sustained Western investment. But the danger doesn't just stop at that fortified line. A frozen conflict in Ukraine would create a perilous new reality for all of Europe, with risks that go way beyond the battlefield itself. This creates what experts call a perilous feedback loop. You've got factions in both the West and in Moscow who believe they can escalate things without any real consequences. Each side thinks the other is bluffing, and that dramatically increases the chances of a catastrophic misstep that could just spiral out of control. And this highlights a terrifyingly real flashpoint. There's a Milwaukee Gap. Moscow sees any threat to this little corridor as an existential one. Since it's surrounded by NATO members, it's a point of deep strategic anxiety for Russia, which makes it a potential trigger for a much, much wider war. So the crucial point here is that the stakes are truly global. An armistice that doesn't restore Ukraine's territory would basically rewrite the entire post-Cold War security architecture. It would send a dangerous message that aggression can actually pay off, as long as you can hold out. And this brings us to the ultimate cost of just hitting the pause button. What is actually gained and what is lost when you trade open warfare for a permanent high-stakes standoff? At the end of the day, we're talking about a trade. You're exchanging relief from the immediate, intense suffering of war for a future of constant tension, where the fundamental dispute, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, remains completely unresolved, just festering indefinitely. And that's really the question we want to leave you with. An armistice can stop the killing, for now, But it may not bring true peace. It could simply be the beginning of the next, and potentially more dangerous, phase of the conflict. Thank you for joining us for this explainer. We really hope this breakdown provided some clarity on a very complex issue. And if you found this valuable, please like, share, and subscribe to the Global WarWatch Network. We'd also love to know your thoughts in the comments section below, and you can join our community on social media through the links in the description.